And again, happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. This is a very unexpected, I'm excited because I had an unexpected surprise this week. My youngest daughter, Samantha, is experiencing Mother's Day for the first time. So that was 6 weeks ahead of schedule. And we were very surprised on Tuesday night when I was in choir and I checked my phone really quickly and saw that they were on their way to the hospital. And I thought, what? How can that be? But all is good. God has a plan, and it worked out really well. Both Sam and Ezra are doing quite well, so very excited for them today. And I was going to speak on the life lessons that my mom had taught me. But as I was thinking about it and really wrestling with it, because as Pastor Curtis said, Mother's Day can be such a mixed bag. This is a hard Sunday to preach, because Mother's Day, for some, it's an exciting time, and it's a time where you get to be pampered and spoiled, and for others, it's a painful reminder of what isn't, or what can't be in your life, or what hasn't been yet. Or you've lost your mom. And so it's a painful reminder of that you don't have in the moment. And so it's a time of maybe reflection of all the blessings that you did have. Or maybe you weren't fortunate enough to have a mom who's a godly influence in your life. And your mom was an abusive person. Like I remember hearing stories of some friends of mine telling me about how when their parents wanted to go out drinking, they'd stick them in feed bags and stick them on a coat rack. My first thought is, where did they get those screws that would hold the kids up? But my heart broke when I heard that story, that they didn't have the influence of a godly parent. And so it's a hard message to preach. And as I was wrestling with what do I say, and I've been so fortunate. My mom is she's one of my heroes of the faith. My mom right now this morning is preaching in Rest Stool to the church there, and she's been such a godly influence in my life. I'll give you one of the lessons that she taught me that was worth passing on, because I think it pertains. Our family was going through a really, really hard time. We had lost my brother, and wrestling through how could a loving God allow something so horrible to happen? And I remember after the fact, this was a while ago, I was sitting down talking to her about it because I had a different lens than some of my family members. And remember my mom saying that in that moment, she was reminded of the saying, don't interpret God's character through the lens of your circumstances, but rather interpret your circumstances through the lens of God's character and his promises to us. So go with what you know is true. And what we know is true is that God is faithful, and that God wants good for us, that God is our provider, our protector, and our lover, our faithful, faithful Father. And if you know that to be true, your circumstances and the lens that you view them change significantly. And so that was one of the many nuggets of wisdom that my mom had given to us kids. So I'm very fortunate. But as I was wrestling with what to preach on, a couple of weeks ago, in the middle of the night, God woke me up and totally changed my message. And I was surprised because it actually, around the same time, Curtis had the same change in plans with his message. And our messages really line up. So mine is really a continuation of Pastor Curtis's message. Last week, Pastor Curtis, if you remember, talked about the 4 friends that came alongside the paralyzed man and helped dig through the roof. Well, today, I want to dig a little deeper in terms of how to be one of those 4 friends. What does that look like in the church today? So I'm hoping you'll come along with me on the journey. But before I get too far, I'm hoping that we can agree on 2 things. The first thing that I'm hoping we can agree on is that the world today is a challenging place to live. Do you agree with me? I mean, look around. It just feels like we're living in an incredibly challenging time. According to the World Health Organization, so I did a bit of research just on the statistics. According to the WHO, there's a 25% increase in the prevalence of anxiety and depression worldwide during the pandemic. 25% increase in anxiety and depression. And all you have to do is really look around, and I think you'll see that. It's prevalent. We've lost connections to the things that give us life. People have lost connections to family members, and they're struggling. We are made for community. We are. We can't do this alone. This past year, one of Heather and I, our guilty pleasures is that we sometimes binge watch shows. And we sat down recently and binge watched the TV show on Amazon Prime called Alone. I'm not a big reality TV kind of guy, but that one got my interest. It's 10 people are dropped off in the middle of nowhere. Usually the first couple episodes were in Vancouver Island. They're dropped off alone, and they've got this list of supplies that they can take. And it's the whole premise of the show is it's a contest to see who can stay the longest, who can live alone the longest. Guess how long they've had 9 seasons so far. They're airing the 10th season this year. Guess what the longest time frame that anybody's been able to live alone for to date? 100 days. Sounds like a lot. The average, though, 34 days. 34 days, and most of them are like, you know what, I can't take this, or I miss my loved ones, or you know what, I've accomplished all that I want to here. I need people. And that's what they say. It's not the survival gets monotonous, but it's the lack of relationships and the lack of connections with people that makes such a huge difference in our lives. There's another statistic that's it's a scary statistic for me, and I think, again, we've seen the results of it in our own community. There's StatsCan did a survey that said that suicidal ideation in 2019 was 2.7% in adults in Canada reported suicidal thoughts. 2021, it jumped to 4.2%. So that's fairly significant that people were thinking about ending their life because it wasn't worth it. We live in challenging times. We live in dark times. We live in hard times. But I think the church should be different. So my question to you is this: what does it mean to be the church today? So that's not a rhetorical question. I'm looking for some answers. What does it mean to be the church? Not just today, but to be the church. Hope. Anything else? And to steal Pastor Kurt, to be the hands and feet of Christ. Like, we're supposed to be a little bit different. Going to church needs to be more than just a checky box activity. Last week, Pastor Curtis shared a statistic that really, it jumped out to me. It was that in the mid-1900s, and that sounds so long ago when you say it like that, doesn't it? But it wasn't that long ago. But the prevalence, people went to church, 75% of people reported to going to church on a regular basis. And I remember growing up as a kid, all of the friends that I had on my block went to church. All of their families did, except for one, and they were the anomaly. And that's not the case today. Now, it's 6%. When you look at the stats, 6% of Canadians report going to church on a regular basis. And I don't think we need a survey to tell us that church attendance is in the decline in North America. There are denominations that are closing a church a week in Canada right now. Even in our own community, the Anglican Church in South River shuttered their doors last week. Churches are on the demise. And why? I think there's 2 reasons for that. I think the first reason that churches are in the demise is that they quit being relevant. I think they went from, when attendance started to drop, they went from being mission-minded to being survival-minded. And you can only survive so long when you quit living up to the one thing that we were called to do, and that was to go and tell, to go and spread the gospel everywhere. And as soon as you start to kind of shudder, and how do we protect what we have now? We lose focus of the things that are important to us, and we quit being relevant. And so people quit coming. The other reason that I think the church is in decline is that I believe we're living in the last days. We are seeing the signs of the self-centered culture that Paul wrote to Timothy about in 2 Timothy, chapter 3. And it says this. I'm just going to read it really quickly. It says, "You should know this, Timothy, that in the last days there'll be very difficult times." I think we're living that. "For people will love only themselves and their money." Again, sounds a little familiar. "They'll be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents and ungrateful. They'll consider nothing sacred. They'll be unloving and unforgiving. They'll slander others and have no self-control. They'll be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends, be reckless, be puffed up with pride, and love pleasure rather than God." Does that sound familiar? Does that not sound like the day and age that we're living in? But that should not be the description of the church. We should be different. In fact, we are called to be different. We should be a beacon of hope in the darkness. We should be the place that when people are saying, who loves me still? Who cares? We should be the answer to that question. The church. We are called to be different. There are two verses, and I'll get them up here in a second, but Hebrews 10:24-25 says this. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. I'm going to read that first line again because I think that's pretty cool. Can you imagine this? Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. I can imagine people sitting around a room daring each other to outdo each other when it comes to loving their community and doing acts of good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. So again, we're called to encourage one another, to build one another up. And Galatians 6:1-2, and this was the verse that hit me in the middle of the night. Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ. The King James Version says, bear ye one another's burdens. Or the ESV says, bear one another's burdens. That's our call, to bear one another's burdens, to not live that self-centered, me-focused life. We're called to bear one another's burdens. And then the last part of that is, and so fulfill the law of Christ. What is the law of Christ? Well, I think it's this. When people came to Jesus and said, Rabbi, what is the most important commandment? What did he say? He said this, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And the second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. All the rest of the laws can be summed up in these two. And so I think that that's it. When we bear one another's burdens, we are demonstrating that. We're loving others as much as we love ourselves. And that's what we're called to do. Pastor Curtis last week said something that I saw it also it was on the what do they call those short clips? Vines or whatever that you post online? The reels. It was on the reel this week as well. That the church was never called to be a country club. The church was called to carry one another's burdens and walk in the love of Christ and in the power that he has given us. We are made for, we are hardwired to live in community. We're hardwired to live in community with one another. And where do we begin to bear one another's burdens? Well, we live in a day and age that is filled with filters. I don't know if you can make this picture out. I love this picture because our lives often reflect Danny Trejo on this side. I don't know if you know who Danny Trejo is. He's an actor who's had a rough life. He's a rough-looking dude. He's a scary-looking guy. And sometimes that's what our lives look like. They are messy and filled with all kinds of chaos and disruption. And yet, to the outside world, we post on Facebook this picture over here, that everything is great. Oh, what a beautiful day. The sun was shining. I spent amazing time with my family. Meanwhile, you almost killed your kids once or twice that day. You got in a fight with your wife. It was a horrible day. There might be some good points to it, but oftentimes we only post the things years ago now. But when we used to live outside of South River, we had a small 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house, 3 daughters. It was time for us to move. And so we had our house on the market, and at the time, Heather and I were doing youth ministries, and we had done a spaghetti fundraiser that night, or that day. We'd gotten ready for it. Heather made these amazing desserts, and our house was a mess because we had done all the prep at our little tiny house. And then we came to the church, and we had the spaghetti dinner, and sometime during the course of the night, Carol McDonald, who was our real estate agent at the time, said, oh, by the way, I have somebody coming to look at your house tomorrow. And we were doing an all-nighter after the fundraiser here in the basement of the church. And so it was like, oh no, what do we do? So Heather stayed with the kids, and I went home, and I cleaned like a madman. The problem is I only had a very limited amount of time, and so I took our dishes that we had everywhere as we were trying to get ready for the spaghetti dinner. I had taken them, and I hid them in our washing machine and in our dryer, and anywhere that I didn't think the oven was just crammed full. And I did the best superficial clean that you can imagine. It was surface deep. Like if they would have looked any deeper at anything that was our appliances, they would have seen that. They would have been wondering, what is wrong with these people? That's what our lives sometimes look like. Superficially, we look really good and squeaky clean on the outside. But inside, there's hurt and there's pain. I think about, Pastor Curtis again made a statement, you ask the question, how are you today? When people come into church, you greet them, hey, how you doing? And, oh, great, yeah, you? Meanwhile, on the way into church, you had a fight with your kids or your spouse. You almost left them behind because they weren't ready in time. It was, or you're trying to figure out how you're going to afford to buy groceries this week. Like, sometimes we live with the pain and the hurt, and we keep it inside, and we keep it to ourselves. Now, I'm not saying that you should be an open book to everybody you meet. That's a different problem. You need to have some filters in place, because otherwise it's a little awkward. You need to have an audience, people that you know and trust. You need to have some unfiltered friends, some people that you can be unfiltered with, people that can help bear your burdens, people that you can be intimately close with, and know the things that are going on, that you can share and you can ask for help, you can pray with, you can pray for. Because we can't do this alone. We're not made to do this alone. We're made to bear one another's burdens. And you need to find those people that you can be authentic with, because authenticity is attractive. Acts, I love the second chapter of Acts because I think that it sums up the fact that authenticity and bearing one another's burdens is beautiful and attractive to those around you. Acts chapter 2, 42 to 47 says this: all the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. And a deep sense of awe came over them all. And the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day. They met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and they shared meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. I'm going to read that last line again. All the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. Why? Why were people coming and wanting to be a part of that? Because it was attractive. It was beautiful to know that you had somebody else on your side, in your corner, helping you out when you were down. That if you had a need, you could share with somebody and they would meet that need. That's what we're called to be today. We're called to bear one another's burdens. And so now, I want to dive in just really quickly to my last point, and that is the how-to. That bearing one another's burdens doesn't have to be hard work. It doesn't have to be hard work. I think oftentimes we think that in order to bear one another's burdens or be the church, it's going to cost us more than we have. And the truth is that all of us have unique gifts and abilities. Again, Pastor Curtis said on April the 30th, be willing to give what you have. So what is it you have? If you have time, give time. If you have money, give money. If you have talents, give your talents. He shared a quote again last week that it was like, are you preaching my sermon? So I stole that quote and I put it in mine. God will always do his part, but he won't do your part. Walking by faith involves action. So that's a quote by Tony Evans. And so here's the part where my challenge comes to you. What is the thing that you have that you can do that can be a blessing to those around you? And even those here inside this very building. And then to those in this town and in this community, we have so much need and hurt here in these doors and just outside these doors. We need to be a beacon of hope and light in the darkness and in this community. And so I'm going to put in a quick plug for small groups. I think the small groups are the ultimate way to live in community with each other. I think that something magical happens when you get together and you share a meal and you share the load. You share your burdens. You have a safe group of people that you can talk with. I love my small group. They pray with us. Like, we can pray with each other and be honest with each other when we're going through the darkest of times. When it feels like, we've hit rock bottom, they're there. And I know that if I have a need, I can call them and they'll come and help me. That's the power of a small group. And so if you have a place where you could open up your home and have people come in, doesn't have to be hard. There are videos so that if your gift is not leading a Bible study, you don't have to do that. There are all kinds of resources today. If you have a house, open your doors. Create a safe place for people to come. If that's not you and you don't have that place, maybe you could come and be a friend at a different small group. So that's my plug for small groups. I think that they are powerful, powerful ways to bear one another's burdens. But there's a list. I have some spiritual burdens. If somebody's struggling with an issue, we read earlier in Galatians 6, where it said, verse 1, if somebody's struggling, if they're caught in sin, if they're wrestling with an issue, you can come alongside and you can pray with them. You can correct them and then help them. Be an accountability partner. You can host a small group. You can be a part of a small group. You can be willing to pray for and with people. You can call someone and let them share their heart with you and just listen. If it's a financial burden, some people are blessed with finances. You've got enough. You're okay. But you can supply meals to those in need. James chapter 2, verses 4 to 17 says this: what good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but you don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see a brother or sister who has no food or clothing, and you say, oh, goodbye, have a good day, stay warm and eat well, but then you don't give that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? So you see, faith by itself isn't enough. Unless it produces good deeds, it is dead and useless. So again, come alongside somebody. If you see somebody that doesn't have food, supply them with a meal. Donate or volunteer at the local food bank. We are so blessed. In this church, we've got some people that serve willingly and faithfully at the local food bank. And so thank you. God bless you for what you're doing. You're being obedient. Be obedient. Pray or pay for someone's groceries. I know Pastor Curtis has talked about this a bunch, going into Foodland and seeing, and it's an expensive place to buy groceries. So maybe it's not their whole bill, but even buying some of their stuff. But pay for someone's groceries. And then there's social or relational burdens. If you know somebody that's got small kids and they haven't had the opportunity to go on a date with their spouse for a while, and you know money's tight, volunteer to watch the kids. We'll pray for you while you're doing it, because that's a hard thing to do. I had my grandkids yesterday, and the day before, some of them had Steph and Josh's kids, and I love them to pieces, and I'm so excited when their parents come to take them home. They are amazing, but they're exhausting. There's just so much they want, and so little you can do while you're trying to watch them, because you turn your back for a second, and the next thing you know, you got to fix something that they broke. Or it's quiet. Then you worry. Then it's like, oh no, where are they? We didn't have such a problem with that yesterday. It was more the noise. But the other part, visit people in their hospital. Oftentimes people think, oh, that's the pastor's job. That is not the pastor's job. The pastor's job is to be the shepherd to the church. Our job is to be the hands and feet of Christ, to go and meet the needs. And you've got the relationships with people that he doesn't have. Yes, there's a time and a place for the pastor to go, but we are called to go and lay hands on one another, to pray for one another. It doesn't say, and the pastor should go. It says the elders, and it says, but you should go and pray for the sick. Go and be a blessing. That's your job. That's our job. Go and visit shut-ins. There are people that again, it broke my heart for the last couple of years to see nursing homes shutter the doors so that people weren't allowed to go in. People who are the most vulnerable and have the fewest people already to come and visit could no longer have people come and see them. Oh, that should not be the case. They need a visit. They need a friend. Go. Ecclesiastes 4:9-12 says this. 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, 2 people lying close together can keep each other warm. But how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but 2 people standing back to back can conquer. 3 are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. And the last verse is this. I tell you, from Matthew 18:19-20 says this. I also tell you this. If 2 of you agree here on earth concerning anything you ask, my Father in heaven will do it for you. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name as my followers, I am there among them. Folks, we're not meant to do life alone. We're meant to do life together. The church needs to be a beacon of hope and light in the darkness. We're living in dark and challenging times, and you know people, you've got friends that their lives they're falling apart, and they need somebody to point them to Jesus, who can make all the difference in the world. And he can make all the difference in the world through us. We can be his hands and feet. So my challenge to you today is this. What do you have? What is it that you have to give? Look around you and see those in need. Get to know the people even within these doors, but don't stop here. It can't stop here. We are not called to be a social club, a country club, but this is also a good place to start. If you're hurting, you don't have to do this alone. We are called to bear one another's burdens. Get close to people. Build those relationships of trust. We are willing. People are wanting desperately to help, to bear one another's burdens. Do you ever notice at Christmas time we say it's more blessed to give than to receive? Is that right? Yes, more blessed to give. I thought I had it backwards for a second. I was getting worried. Why do we have to stop there? So many times, I think we want to instinctively be a blessing to others. But sometimes we get, we let our filters, we put our filters in place. Take the time and let your filter down. Find somebody that you can do that safely with. So that's my challenge to you today. Will you take up that cause with me? Will you help bear one another's burdens? Because we can't do this alone. It's too painful. But together we can. Would you pray with me? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this place of worship. Lord, I thank you that Bethel is a beacon of hope and light. God, I pray that you would just, Lord, place on our hearts a burden that we can meet. God, I pray that I thank you so much for the skills and abilities that you have blessed this congregation with. God, I pray that you would just move in our hearts and stir us up, that we'd find a place that we can use our gifts, that use our talents. God, I pray that you'd give us an even deeper passion for the lost in our community, for the lost in our world. God, I pray that today, if there's somebody that's struggling, alone, Lord, that you give them the courage to reach out to somebody that they can trust. Lord, I thank you that you have called us and that also you have said that your shoulders are big enough to bear our burdens. God, today, if there's somebody that's just really struggling with a burden, Lord, I pray that you just meet them where they're at. Lord, give them the peace and strength that they need and draw others around them to help share their load. Lord, you are so awesome. Your character and your promises hold true. Lord, help us to be a good reflection of you to others. Lord, go with us now. And again, help us to be a beacon of hope and light in the darkness. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Be blessed this week. Be a blessing to others this week.